In this video, I'll be trying my hand at making a San Mai style of knife, which is basically a steel sandwich with a hard filling that will stay sharp and a pretty outside that will look nice. Starting with an old file and some scrap plate, I cut them, cleaned them, and arc weld them into a stack. The stack is then forge welded into a single solid billet. Personally, I like to go over all of my welds twice in order to help make sure that I don't make any mistakes. Once it's all firmly stuck together, the long process of forging it out begins. Small adjustments are made with a smaller hammer before the stack is folded over and welded again. Excess flux is quickly brushed off with a cheap wire brush and the weld is firmly beaten into existence. A much nicer wire brush can then be used after the weld is done to clean it up for a second pass. Again, the billet is drawn out. At this point I decided to also throw in a small chunk saved from a previous failure. With 8 layers on the 2 outside lumps, and 6 in the middle one, the layer count is 20 after this weld. Another weld doubles the number of layers up to 40. I now start forging out a bar of silver steel that will be the core of the knife. However, because the bar was fairly narrow, I couldn't make it wide enough to insert directly between two pattern welded outsides, so instead I welded it to one side of the billet and folded it over, making the silver steel filling thicker. After making sure to put the silver steel on the inside of the fold, the final weld is set, bringing the final layer count up to 91. Now, with all the welding complete, the shape of the knife can roughly be forged out. Normally, I would forge the tip of the knife instead of cutting it, but I need to keep the silver steel in the center of the billet, and I didn't want to risk moving it. It's fine if it happens in the tang of the knife, since that part isn't going to be holding an edge. With the knife blank roughed up, the profile is now refined on a bench grinder. profile is then refined further using a hand file. With the profile now properly formed, the knife is cleaned up in preparation for heat treatment. After some stress-relieving cycles, the knife is heated and quenched in oil to harden it, and then baked in a small toaster oven to temper it. Now sharpening can begin, being careful to avoid any overheating and making sure that the bevels are nice and straight and even. It was at this point that I noticed there was a crack in the blade where one of the welds went slightly wrong. I had three options: throw the blade away because it was ruined, grinding away at it until I removed the flaw, or just ignore it. I opted to just ignore it, but put less effort and resources into the rest of the blade. This slightly rotten lump of oak is part of a huge block that was lying in my garden for several years. Some of it was usable, so I started shaping it into a handle. Two holes were then drilled into the wooden handle, which was then burnt onto the tackle, giving a nice snap fit. The handle is now sandwich shaped. I found this tiny lump of ebony and decided to use it to cap the handle. The end of the larger block of wood was rather unsightly, and I decided to use this bit of ebony to hide the ugly parts, making life much easier. The cap was then glued onto the handle using the knife to make sure that the holes lined up properly. Once the glue was dry, the handle was sanded down to make the two bits of wood even, and then polished as smooth as I cared to make them. After being sharpened, the knife was then polished using several grades of sandpaper, from 120 grit up to 1200 grit. Using polishing paste and a button wheel, the final shine is given. It was then etched in ferric chloride, which didn't bring out the pattern as much as I would have liked. Due to the way it was ground, I ended up with rather different patterns on either side of the blade. Finally, after gluing on the handle, the wood was rubbed with some Danish oil to give it some colour, some shine, and to protect it from water damage. And there we have it, a failure. Oh well, you live, you learn.